Welcome to this special edition of Surviving the Shitstorm with me, Kieran, the Boy Bailey Speaks. So, you know by now, the concept of this is dead simple. It's to find people who can share ideas, understanding, and a little bit of insight, and most importantly, a good old solid dash of hope, because that's what we need. That's what we need right now. And that's what I've done for you today. So I've had a great conversation with Lucy Noone-Blake. Lucy is a brand and comm strategist. She's a real specialist in that area. She's going to drop some absolute gold, if I'm honest with you. So do me a favour, grab a notepad, grab a pen, and start thinking about being prepared. What's it going to take to come next? What has to happen next for you to just come out of this absolutely swinging? Because the thing that we need to keep in mind at all times during this dreadful time of our life is that the joy of a good storm is even the worst storm will eventually pass. We just need to make sure that when it does pass, we're ready to go. So, welcome to Lucy Noone-Blake. You're going to enjoy this one. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for joining me. I appreciate it a lot. Obviously, this is a little podcast series called Surviving the Shitstorm, which is a bold title, but it's very much where we find ourselves in right now. I think we've been looking at a perfect storm for the last 12 months of rates, of rent, of customers kind of declining. But I think now we have certainly moved sharply into the shitstorm territory. So if you could give us a little 30-second kind of elevator sort of pitch of who you are, what you're about, and it'd be amazing just to tell people who you are.
My name is Lucy Noone-Blake. I am based in Manchester. I've kind of grown up in the hospitality industry in one way or another. My parents owned, fortunately now I suppose owned in the past tense, a big produce company. We sold fruit and veg and various other things to restaurants and hotels and stadia and all sorts in the Manchester area. I then moved across into restaurants and spent the majority of my career in restaurant business development, marketing, that kind of thing. Went freelance when my son was born. And I've been fortunate enough, that was a year and a bit ago, and I've been fortunate enough to sort of arrive at the point until about 2 weeks ago where I had a lovely little business going with some fabulous clients and some fantastic clients that I've worked with already that I kind of still on great terms with and pick up little bits and bobs for here and there. I suppose the best way to nutshell what I do is creative business development strategy, so kind of understanding the reasons why perhaps things are not working in the way you want them to, or you're not making quite enough money in the areas of the business that you want to, and putting a strategy in place that doesn't just gloss it. It kind of works from the very back of the business and goes right the way to the front, hopefully gives you a better outcome in the end. So it's kind of a bit of everything, a bit of comms, a bit of ops, a bit of business development, an awful lot of hospitality, I hope, loads of kind of insight, I think, coming from different areas of my life, really. Having grown up in kitchens and carrying boxes of iceberg around since I was knee-high to a grasshopper. So that's where I'm at the moment. And now I'm here, stuck in the house.
Like a lot of us, certainly for the foreseeable. So I guess that you would say that you're an operator. It's running through your blood, isn't it, really? It's come there from the start, from the retail perspective.
Yeah, I suppose I'm not, in the sense I've never really, I was bartender at university, but I've not been a waiter or a bartender for a long time. The last kind of operational job I really did was I was reservations manager for the opening and marketing. I kind of took on 2 roles for the opening of Hawksmoor Manchester. And since then I've been bobbing around doing various different things. But yeah, I take my family business was our whole life. I did it until the day they sold it. They sold it when I was 7 months pregnant, and I was there that day. It runs deep.
I think that helps when you, as you just described, you're covering a lot of bases in the way that you work with your clients. So I think having that kind of background and understanding goes a very long way. So obviously we're in a ridiculous time for the industry right now. I think that everybody is just trying to kind of get their bearings and see where they sit and how we're going to move forward. And there's obviously kind of a good degree of questions around what that looks like and what good looks like and what success looks like and kind of what the future looks like for us, I guess. What would you say the feeling is like in Manchester at the moment?
Well, I've been stuck in the house since Friday, so I can only really go off what I am hearing from friends that I've spoken to. But I think the thing that's really amazed me about all of this is the kind of the overarching positivity and resilience that everybody is showing. There's almost kind of, I think today, I mean, just before we've recorded this, I've just seen Hawksmoor publish their intention, which is to close. They're closing the doors for the foreseeable, which I think is a bit of a sea change. Everybody has been kind of saying, no, we're going to stick at this, we're going to stick at it until we have to close. And then I think perhaps they're the first one to come out and say, right, you know, that's where we're at. But what I think was really kind of interesting and really lovely about what they said was, this is our situation, it's not yours, it's not everybody's. Don't judge everybody by this yardstick. And I think the real thing in Manchester has been an overwhelming sense of community, positivity. I've never spoken to as many people in this industry other than being sort of in Mojo or Crazy Pedros or something in one day. This is the most conversation I think everybody's had. It's been, for us, particularly in Manchester, particularly difficult, I think, because it was due to be NRB today. Too many critics last night and the NRB tomorrow. And it's a really big thing that in Manchester, everybody's massively invested, whether actually or emotionally, or kind of it's just a really good, fun thing that they do. So it's been a bit of a roller coaster in that sense. I think everybody feels desperately for Tom, who was damned if he did and damned if he didn't. There was no real way to win there. But I think what they've done is the best thing. They made the right decision. It's postponed. It'll happen. What can you do? So
you're absolutely right. He is kind of in that position of being damned if he doesn't, damned if he doesn't. You know, you want to go ahead. You want to show that kind of fight. We want to show that resilience in the face of adversity. But then you have that moment of kind of thinking, does it make sense to bring all these people together? And from our perspective, Experience 101, we were due to be in London tomorrow for our fourth event, 120 people. And we took a sort of look at it last week and just thought, does it make sense to bring 120 very kind of key people in the industry into a room and potentially kind of cause an infection further down the line? And just it's really, really hard. There is no getting around it. And that's 120 people. I can't imagine what Tom was going through with NRB. You know, it's kind of it's a show that's grown into something quite spectacular, really, hasn't it?
It's wonderful. It's a hub for the city. It's a hub for the people who work in this industry in the city and the north. People come, like we now see people coming, I mean, this is ridiculous, but up from London, you know, like, wow, people come up from London to something we're doing. We're sort of setting the pace in Manchester, which is great. So, but you know, it'll happen, it'll carry on. I think the question now is less what will happen. I think it's more when will it happen. I think the real uncertainty is how long will the restaurants be closed and how long is it going to be like this, and the government are doing what they're doing, and I'm sure they're doing the best they can as quickly as they can, but nobody can answer that question, can they? The reality of it is nobody knows, and we don't like uncertainty, do we? We control our environment now and we live in our own very controlled bubbles, and everybody's a bit out of their depth, I think.
It's a real challenge when it feels like that control has been taken away from us. I think I think we're in such an unprecedented situation. Anybody who's saying that they know the answers, I think is lying to themselves, really, aren't they, if I'm honest with you?
They can't, can they? Unless
it's impossible.
Some sort of insider knowledge on exactly how an unknown virus works, then no.
It'd be pretty impressive if they did. But sadly, not too many folks out there have a simple answer. So you talked about kind of the way that Hawksmoor delivered that message and the tone of that message. From looking at a situation like this right now, for me, it feels like the messaging is one of the biggest challenges that people will face. Absolutely. How do you define that tone? Where do you pitch it? Kind of the urgency, the nervous, the kind of, there's so much to kind of take into consideration. Kind of how would you advise that people go about doing that?
I honestly think, and I think this is probably the same thing I've said over and over again in all situations, is say whatever is right for you. Tell the truth. Say what you're going to do. Tell people what you're going to do. Make your decision based on really firm principles. Interrogate every single possible questionable angle of whatever it is you're going to say, and then say it. And then make sure that absolutely everybody in your business knows why you've made that decision. So there's nobody in the business that's going to say, well, I don't know, they didn't tell us. You know, everybody needs to know. It needs to have all of the integrity that you can muster It needs to be true, it needs to be honest, and it needs to be well thought out. You can't make a U-turn once you've said it, or you can, but it might be quite difficult. I think in these times people are being fairly accepting of unusual messages, but I think the one take home is that if you're honest and you're truthful and you've told your people what it is you're doing and why you're doing it, then you have a better chance of being okay. And if you are going to have to just get rid of all your people, tell people how difficult that was and make sure people know that you've made the best possible provision for those people that you can, if that's the case. If you haven't, don't say it. If you weren't able to do that, if you had absolutely no cash in the bank and you were not able to make any provision for those staff, don't say that you were, because it will be found out so quickly.
Undoubtedly. So I was chatting with somebody today, and there's a business that's based down south, and they've decided to shutter their doors for 2 weeks, and they've made the decision they're going to pay their staff full pay for those 2 weeks, which is amazing, and it's a great thing to do. But it's, from speaking to them, it seems driven by the idea that they believe this is going to be done within 2 weeks. This is going to be over, which is so either incredibly optimistic or wildly naive that potentially they're going to drive themselves into an issue, I think. Because if you're going to tell people we're going to pay them for 2 weeks, and that 2 weeks comes the end of it, and the problem hasn't resolved in the same way they thought it was perhaps going to, what do they do at that point?
Yeah. Well, I think it's a case of not making any assumptions, doing what you can, and don't overpromise. Because at the end of the day, like you say, if 2 weeks comes to pass and there's no change, or it's got worse and there's no more cash in the bank, then what are you going to do? I think the best thing to do would be to make a plan. Tell people what you're doing. Tell people why you've done it. Be really honest and execute your plan in as fair and kind of reasonable way as you can. I don't think there's any room at the moment for trying to sort of sell anything. I don't think there's any room at the moment for trying to add any kind of gloss to whatever it is you're doing, as long as I think people will see through that now more than ever. Just a really honest, straightforward response is probably the best way, I think.
So fundamentally, now is not the time for sugarcoating. Now is the time just to be as honest as we possibly can be, as upfront as we possibly can be.
Yeah, and I think this is where the independent businesses, and I say this, I mean, independent businesses that are run by people and perhaps not by enormous, great big groups of people, smaller groups of people, might come out a little bit better because they actually have people to talk to the people, if that makes sense. So the message is coming from a person to a person, and the chances are, in most circumstances, I imagine the person delivering the message might be affected as well. I don't think anybody's getting away from this scot-free. So I think potentially there's actually room for the independents to give them perhaps a slightly easier ride in all this, I think.
I guess, to be fair, when you have that connection to your people, that close connection, it's easier to kind of to show that sense of empathy and demonstrate that, rather than kind of when it's being cascaded down through a huge organization. And I think you're right. I think potentially you're going to have that relationship that's a bit more kind of one-on-one, and you can genuinely show that actually, you know what, we're all going to feel this pain together. I was looking at the guys from the Yummy Pub Company on Twitter over the last couple of days, and they've put out their kind of their message. It was quite a defiant message, quite a defiant tone, which I quite enjoyed. But it's also very honest about the fact that, you know what, the three founders, they stopped getting paid from today, so they won't be taking the salary, which is going to cause them some pain. But they're doing that so to try and extend the opportunity for their team. So I think being able to share something like that gives a really honest kind of honest sort of summation of kind of the situation. And again, that kind of, you start to then kind of, I guess you get that kind of emotional bank account. And this kind of comes down to leadership, I guess. In the past, if you've built up that emotional bank account up and you've got enough credit, at this time, people will start to kind of step back and think, you know what, this is my time to kind of to give something back.
I think you have to do that without an ounce of cynicism. I think you have to, these people who have that emotional kind of credit with their readership or their base, or the people that they want to kind of, the people that they are, you know, sort of working with on a daily basis, they get that for a reason. I think now is the time where integrity is going to absolutely shine through. And that's nice, I think. And perhaps it might make some people behave with a little more integrity, because this is probably not the last time we're going to have a crisis like this, is it? I think, if you look at any of the information from the World Health Organization, they think that this isn't going away. I think if anything's going to come of this, perhaps it will improve the way people behave. I think it will improve the way people operate as a community. Where we live in a sort of a network of small streets, and all of a sudden now I'm part of a WhatsApp group of people helping out. Do you need anything? Can we help you with anything? Previously, we knew our kind of immediate neighbours and nobody else, and there's 40 odd people in this group. And I kind of imagine that once all this is over, there'll be some kind of party, I think.
Yeah.
Given the way people are talking. And I think within the wider kind of community, I don't know if you've seen what Jonathan Downey's been doing. He's initially collated about, I think there was about 100 people in a WhatsApp group when I was invited to join it. And it was essentially collating all the information that was pertinent to the hospitality industry and keeping it all in one place. And he kept saying, invite people, anybody you think that might need to comment on this, might need this kind of information. And it grew and grew and grew. The next thing, so he said, right, I'll do another group. So then there was 2, and now there's 4. So I think the maximum in a group is 250 something. So you're looking at about 1,000 people, all in these 4 WhatsApp groups, all seeing the same information, all passing information through the same person. And when this morning came around, I was watching, we had various news channels on in the house, and I think there were 3 or 4 people on 3 or 4 different channels, each of whom were in this group, all delivering the same message, because everyone was talking to each other, everyone had agreed a message. And it was really impressive, and that is community. And I mean, I've looked through the people in the groups, and they're all over the place, the states, they're everywhere. So he's collecting together people and sort of weaponizing the power of people, which is it's incredible, really.
It's an amazing thing. I think when you look at the work that JD is doing on behalf of the industry, it's been incredible, to be fair. And you take a step back, I think, on a personal level. Street Feast obviously announced today that they were going to be closing for the foreseeable future. That's a huge thing for him as a CEO. But to be then, as you say, kind of taking the step to try and kind of unify that message and get everybody kind of singing from the same hymn sheet, to allow us to ensure that we get that consistency of message within the media, which obviously will then in turn impact the government and their actions, hopefully. Absolutely huge for the industry. Absolutely huge.
Yeah, but it's. I think the world that we live in, we've redefined what community means, and now it's coming into its own. I think it doesn't matter if you're around the corner or on the other side of the world. We have the tools to behave like a community and activate like a community and make change like a community. And I think that is the closest I've ever seen to that in action. And I mean, I think it might have only been about 36 hours or so. It feels like forever. I've been watching this WhatsApp group, but it's not been there long. So I'm amazed by the resilience of the people that I've kind of spent my life looking towards. And the other thing is, I think the people who are currently recruiting for positions in all the other industries in this world, in the law professions and what else, they have got an influx of the most incredible people coming towards them, because we know that a lot of hospitality people lost their jobs yesterday, and the skills are so transferable. So I think there's a message needs to go to all these other industries saying, just open your eyes to the people who are coming towards you, because they are so good and they are so well trained and they have so many skills. Just because they don't have any skills that you recognize on paper, you wait till you get them in your office. The way they think, the way they behave, the way they operate is just beyond anything you'll have seen before.
I think you're absolutely right. I think the sort of the talent pool that is about to become available to the wider world and the wider industry is that I don't think they're ready for it, to be honest with you, because
they're going to get a bit of a surprise, I think.
Yeah, I think they will. And I think one of the things that kind of, obviously in the last 2 weeks, we've had the whole kind of low skilled arguments that is incredibly frustrating. But the people within hospitality, as you say, are incredibly well trained. They're incredibly resilient as a nature. It's built within us, to be fair. But they communicate so beautifully well. They have empathy. They're able to build rapport incredibly quickly. They're able to move between task to task without dropping a beat. It is absolutely huge, and it's a big opportunity for the people who are looking up and seeing that opportunity.
Yeah.
So, what do we think? What do you think is going to help brands kind of get through this crisis? What do you think they're going to have to do to just keep pushing through and hopefully have a business
on the back end of it?
Well, I can only really comment from my end. I think there is a lot to be done with regard to communication with your bank, with your finance people, with your landlord, with everybody. I think each of those individual things require a specialist who knows much, much more than I do. But I know that those people are going to have to be spoken to and bargained with and whatever it's going to take. But I really hope that those people will really realise that they have the future of an entire industry in their hands, essentially. From a comms perspective, I'm going to go back to what I said before. It's honesty, it's integrity. And I think the other thing is it's just the people. Before the rent, before the tax, before any of that business, it's the people. There will be people on the payroll who live from paycheck to paycheck, and those people have got to be considered first. I think that the actual human reality of this is what needs to be considered before anything else. So as a business, I think in terms of lasting impact, if you look after the people who need it most in this situation, that will come home to roost time and time again.
I love that. And that is absolutely, couldn't agree with you more, to be honest with you. I think we have a nation, an army of people who will work hard for us and who want to do the very best for us and for our guests and make sure they have memorable experiences. Now is our time to step up and try and help them as best we possibly can do.
Yeah. But I think there's the real conversation. It doesn't need to be done in a way that makes them feel like they're being kind of helped, they're just due. Their wages are due. Pay their wages, pay the job, pay the check for the rota that they were supposed to work for the next God knows how long. I don't know how that happens. I hope the Chancellor realises that there's real people involved in this. From what I saw of the briefing today, it deals with some of the larger issues around rates and rent, but it absolutely doesn't deal with that immediate cash flow problem, which I think we can all
agree on that.
Which is essentially, when we say cash flow problem, what we're actually saying is payroll.
Well, that's the first challenge, isn't it? I think that moment when you can't make payroll is the moment that we are technically insolvent, I guess, is the extreme kind of end of that scale. So making sure the government having to try and find a way of stepping in and helping, looking at some of the kind of the analysis of the Chancellor's announcement today over on Twitter. And I call some of it analysis from smart, intelligent people. I call some of it just baseless opinion from some folks who really should just shushy and listen a little bit more. But there are some very smart, intelligent people who are seeing signs that within the next couple of days, we're going to hear something more from the Chancellor about being able to help people with their pay packet, with their salaries. And I think, you're looking at kind of what you're looking at what the French have done, Macron making that bold statement that no business would go bankrupt on the back of coronavirus. You look at the Danes, 75% of salaries paid for the forthcoming future. It's doable, it's achievable. We just, as a country, I think we need to sense it, we need to feel it. I think that goes back to that consistency of message so that everybody is out there sharing the same song and the same kind of idea, that we can get that understanding based across. Okay, so I guess the final thing what I'm going to say is there anybody that you've looked at and think, you know what, you are absolutely killing it? Is there anybody you look at and say, go and pay attention to what these people are doing? Go and have a look at kind of where they're at and on their social.
I think everybody is. I really don't think it's wise to say, go and look at how this person's doing it, because you don't know what their situation is. You don't know what their, you don't know if they own the building that they operate from, or you don't know if they've got nothing in the bank. You've got no idea what is driving the response that they're putting out. So I think I go back to what I said before. The best thing to do is just make sure you've interrogated your response, that you decide on your response. You make sure every single thing that you're saying is true and it's been said with integrity, and that if you ever sit and look back at whatever it is you're saying and those decisions you've made, you'll be able to say, hand on heart, I did the right thing. And I think that's the best way. And just make sure that message flows out. Do your own social. If it is, even if you've never picked up the Twitter before, do it, because I think in times like this, people will understand if perhaps it's not exactly right, but it'll be better because it's honest and it's true and the message is correct.
Really good advice. Really good advice. Where can the people listen? Where can they kind of see what you're all about? Where can they kind of listen to your thoughts and get a better understanding of you?
I spend quite a bit of time on Twitter, but I do. I tell you what, here's a nice one. When the NRB comes back, I host the debate that precedes Tom's big name debate. So I host the debate at the NRB. There's always two speakers. There's one where it's a panel of 4, and there's one where Tom talks to. It's usually a chef, and I host the panel of 4. This year it was due to be Kate Nichol, and Sebastian Fogg, Nick Clark from Hop Trading, and James Bates from Murray. And I was so disappointed not to be able to do that. But
That's
hopefully, I know it's cool, isn't it? Hopefully, with their agreement, we'll be doing that again one day. So yeah, buy a ticket to that. Support Tom. Come and see me frighten myself to death doing that, and come for a beer afterwards.
That's a great plan. We'll keep an eye out for that, and obviously when NRB's re-announced and kind of put back out there, we'll make sure we're kind of shouting about that, letting people know where that is as well, and hopefully we'll be up there too to come and see you host your panel. I mean, for me, the minimum is I love Murray as a restaurant.
Oh, so
that disco
good.
cauliflower is the best thing in the world.
See, nobody else seems to get this. The best thing, they do like a hummus with green chili on chips. And it's just the best thing.
That is good, actually. You're right.
It's so good. Tasty. Disco cauliflower's nice, but I mean, everybody needs to turn around and look at the hummus on chips.
Amazing. Thank you very much for your time, Lucy.
See you soon.
Thanks very much to Lucy. That was an amazing conversation. Hope you enjoyed it as much as I did and as much as we did. Keep your ears out for the next edition in this podcast series. All talented people, all looking to share, all looking to help. Just remember that the way we get through this is together.
We need more help, call the whole town. Now let's try and get this thing off the ground. All in together, let's gather round. We're gonna try and get this thing off the ground.